Hey everybody, welcome back to Grain Free Homestead. I'm Stephanie. Today we're going to make strawberry jam. So here's our frozen strawberries. We need to make room in the freezer. So I'm going to walk you through the simple steps of making strawberry jam. If you've never canned before or you're new to canning, strawberry jam is the easiest to start with. It is probably one of the first things that I ever started canning with. So we're going to go through the simple steps of canning, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get 8 to 10 pints of jam in your pantry. Okay, so first things first, I use pectin. A lot of people don't use pectin. There is other ways you can cook the jam down longer, do a jelly test. I do that for certain types of jams and jellies, but for strawberry, I don't. I like pectin. So inside the pectin box, I literally go by this recipe. Make sure you get the cooked jam recipes. There's freezer ones and jelly ones. They're all on the back. But you want the cooked jam recipe, okay? And it literally tells you step by step what to do. It's really, really hard to mess up, okay? So the first thing it says is there's like a little, here's your pectin, in case you've never used it, it's just a bag. It tells you how much you need. You go down to the fruit that you're using. So it's 8 cups of strawberries. Tells you to remove the cores. And then so that ends up being 5 cups of crushed strawberries and 7 cups of sugar. I am not using a reduced sugar jam. This is a full sugar jam. If you reduce the sugar, you need to use a different type of pectin for low sugar. And it kind of tells you in bold letters up here, do not reduce the sugar. That will keep your jam from setting. So you can buy the yellow box of Sure-Gel, which is the full sugar, or you can get the pink box, which is reduced sugar pectin. Okay, we're using full sugar pectin. All right, let's get going on this. So the first thing we're gonna do, I've already kind of done the first step, is you measure out 8 cups, and this is an 8-cup measure of strawberries. And you go ahead and we're gonna pour them in. I use one of these, the meat, I use these for like hamburger and stuff, but I love it when I make strawberry jam. And if you get down in here, you can see I'm just kind of cutting them up. You can use some like other tools to smash them. This is just what works for me. I like them kind of chunky. I want some strawberry chunks in the jam. So you just kind of cut it up to whatever is your preference on that. So once we get this crushed up to how we like, we're going to go ahead and add a whole package of the pectin to the strawberries. We're going to heat that up to a full rolling boil. Okay. And I got a little helper here. She's going to help me crush these up. Okay, once you get it crushed up to your desired texture and chunkiness that you like for your jam, some people probably crush them all the way up. I like to have, chunks of the fruit in our jams. I prefer jams over jellies for the most part. Then you're gonna go ahead and stir in your pectin. So we're using the whole package. I use Sure-Gel, but there's all different kinds. I've used them all. There isn't any that I haven't tried that I didn't like. But Sure-Gel comes in the double packs, and I can usually get a good deal on them at our local Walmart is where I get it. So the pectin and the fruit are in the pot, and you're going to bring that to a full rolling boil. So I'm going to turn my heat up just a little bit. I don't turn it up on high. I don't want it to scorch or anything. I've kind of learned over the process of everything to have everything measured out ahead of time. So I already have my 7 cups of sugar measured out in this. This bowl is actually just a giant measuring cup. So it's really helpful just to get it all measured out and prepared ahead of time. That way you're not worrying about that when the heat is on the stove and all that stuff. Okay, so you want to kind of continue to stir this so it doesn't stick to the bottom, and you want a full rolling boil, a boil that doesn't stop boiling when you stir it. So you want it to be a full boil. So it takes it just a few minutes to get it up to that heat. I am gonna add, this is optional, you do not have to do this, but I usually do. I add a tablespoon or so of butter to the mix, and that keeps the foam. When you make jam, it can foam up really bad, and when you add the butter to it, I guess the fat in it keeps the foam down, so you don't have to skim as much of the foam off of the jam. Once you get to this point, then we can add all the sugar in.
Steamy.
Once you get all that mixed in, you bring it back to a rolling boil, but this time you need to time it for 1 minute. So while we're waiting for this to come back to a rolling boil, you look in here. We already have our jars hot and ready and sanitized. I'll go ahead and have my jars out on my area that I have set up for canning. Okay, I'm gonna show you guys before I even get to canning. I have all my stuff out. This is just how I do it every time. I have this little handy dandy thing here. Sometimes I use it to tighten the lids, to hold the jars when they're hot. This is my jar lifter. I use these to get the jars out of the water. This to ladle, I like a small ladle, I don't use a big one, to ladle the jam into the jars. My funnel, and then I have my lids and rings ready. Now on the new ball lids, it says in the directions, you know how you used to put them in a pot and get them warm and keep them warm. Well, you don't do that anymore. You just rinse them in warm soapy water and have them set to the side. And I've been doing that for a couple years, and I haven't had any problems or issues. I always have a towel here so that I'm not setting my jars on the counter. My clean wash rag to wipe the rims with. And I have a heat pad here to put my jam here. So I'm gonna put my jam, the pot of jam here, and have all my empty jars ready to fill up.
This smells amazing.
How long has it been doing that?
Oh, is it just, I don't know.
Just now? You wanted to do this for a minute. I've been watching the clock here. Got a few more seconds. I will tell you guys, I had enough strawberries to do 2 batches. But my grandma always said, be careful doubling your batches and tripling your batches for jam. I have doubled them successfully. I will tell you that. And I have tried tripling and quadrupling because some recipes are pretty small. You know, it doesn't make but 4, 5, 6 jars. Okay, it's been a minute. Turn that off. I'm going to transfer this over to this hot pad here. But I did not double it today because we're doing a video. I wanted you to see this is how much you get out of a single jam recipe. So we're going to move this. All right, so I've got my funnel. You can put your funnel in your jar. I like to get it as close to the pot as I can. I give it a good stir, that way you get an even amount of the juice and the fruit in every jar. Because if you just kind of let it sit there. Now I didn't have any foam to speak of, enough to skim, but if you get like a white foam, there's a little bit right there. You could skim off a little bit of that. See how that comes right off? Because I put that butter in there, there really wasn't too much to fool with. But depending on your fruit, also like what fruit you're doing, you'll get more foam on different types of fruits.
So what happens if the foam stays in there?
It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't look as pretty from everything that I can tell. It's kind of like having air in the jar. Over time, if you were going to have this for a couple of years, it may cause it to go bad or not last as long. So I just start filling it up. We use pints instead of jelly jars because we are eating this, and then I'd rather have a bigger jar, use less lids, and take up less room in the fridge, to be honest. And we go through a jar that's pretty quick between breakfast and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches during school. Now you want to leave a 1/4 inch of head space, and head space, let me get it where you can see it. It's about a 1/4. The head space is the amount of space that you leave from the top of your jelly line to the top of the jar. So a 1/4 inch is less than, the least amount it'll ever be. Sometimes you leave a 1/2 inch or more head space. So I like to fill them all up and then go back and lid them. That's totally up to your preference. You can fill each one up, wipe the rim, and lid it as you go. I like to fill them all up and then go back and wipe them and lid them all at one time. That's just the process that I do. If only you guys could smell how awesome this smells. And they have little tools that'll measure the headspace for you. I've just kind of been doing, after you do this for a while, you pretty much know where that's at. I always have a little jar that I sanitize with them, just in case I don't have enough jam to fill up a whole jar. And I think this one's going to be perfect. Yep. It's just a little something I've learned over time, is to have multiple size jars sanitized and ready to go, so that you're not scrambling at the last minute or having to put some in the fridge that you really don't need right now in the fridge. And I'm going to wipe the rims. So I haven't used this rag for anything else. I just got it out, and I'm going to wipe it. It's a clean, wet rag. I'm going to make sure all the jam is off the rims, because if you get jam on the rim and you put your lid on there, it can keep it from sealing. It's like the jam gets in between the seal and the jar, and it can cause it not to seal, or to have a failed seal later on, a premature fail. And we don't want that. So we got 5.5 pints, because this is a 1/2 pint here. So I kind of just keep moving my rag around because it does get jam on there. All right, and next we're gonna lid. Now remember, these are the lids that, you make sure they're good and clean, and you lid it, and you wanna do finger tight. You don't wanna do it too tight. You want air to be able to escape out of it, and that's what causes the seal. I'm just going to tighten those. Now I am going to show you all this one. This is a 1-piece lid. I'm using it because I have it up here. I do have a whole bunch of these. I used it last year for my raspberry sauce. These are reusable. They can be reused 2 to 3 times. I got these last year or the year before when there was a shortage of lids and rings. I got them from a farm store. So this will be my second use on this one here. So I'm trying it out. And the seal looks good. It's good and clean. Everything looks good. So I'm going to try it on this one here. And it's the same way, it's just finger tight. The next step is getting them into the canner. Jams you want to can for 10 minutes. We're going to turn the heat up even higher on this. My jars are hot, so when you have a hot liquid in a hot jar and you're putting it in the hot water, you shouldn't have to worry about them busting or cracking. Most of the time when I have that happen, it's because it's pickles and they're cool, like cucumbers are cool, and they cool the jar down, and then you're putting them back into hot water. So my water is not boiling. I do put them in there slowly, just as a precaution, to help that glass kind of acclimate so that it doesn't crack or bust. Because one, you don't want to lose a jar, but also you've spent time and money and energy on your jam. Better?
Yep.
You want your jars to have at least an inch of water or so over the top of the lid, which once you put all your jars in here, it raises the water level. For some reason, I always like to put the little one in the middle. There's nowhere that says you have to do that. It's just what I do. And so if you look closely, you can see little bubbles coming out. See the bubbles? That's why you don't want to tighten it down so tight that the air can't come out. It can actually cause the jar to bust. So we're going to fold these down. This one's in the way. Move it over. So normally you can fit like 7 jars in here. You can actually do more if they're a small jar. And we're going to go ahead and put the lid on it. Wait a couple minutes to get up to full boil. And then jams are 10-minute processing time. So as soon as I usually see the steam start really coming out around the edge, I start my timer for 10 minutes. And then we'll show you guys what happens next.
Video.
Okay, so we're almost at our 10-minute mark of processing our jam. So during that time, we washed the pan and got it clean again. You always want to wash it because if you add sugar and start a new batch, your next batch may not set, because you want to start out with fruit and pectin only and then add your sugar. And there's so much sugar of what's left coated in here, you want to make sure you wash all that out. So I'm going to turn our heat off and I'm going to let that sit. It's been exactly 10 minutes. I watched our timer. You can set a timer. It's up to you guys. I've got all my utensils clean. I have this ready to go again. So we're getting ready to get our jars out of the canner. So I'm going to let this it's going to boil down for a minute or so. And then I'll take the lid off and let it rest for another probably minute to 2 minutes, and then I'll get them out. The reason that I'm doing that is if you just open the lid and get them out, you'll have a situation, there's a name for it, but basically the contents inside your jar will try to funnel out, and it'll actually spill over onto the outside and run out, and you don't want that. You don't want to waste the good stuff that you have in your jars. So if you just be patient for just 3 or 4 more minutes and then get your jam or whatever you're canning out, you won't have that siphoning happen. Okay, so we're waiting for our jam to kind of cool down just for 2 to 3 minutes before I take it out. So I just wanted to show you guys, during that 10 minutes of processing time, we washed all the dishes. I measured out the 7 cups of sugar and my 8 cups of strawberries. I went ahead and got my butter out, so I'm gonna use a tablespoon of it, so I got that ready to go. And I got another box of pectin out. Okay, I think we're ready to get the jars out. Jam, especially strawberry jam, you can get it made and done in an hour, hour and 15 minutes if you kind of move in a streamlined way like this. Okay, let's get these out. You always want to put them down on a towel. Never put a hot jar on a counter. It can cause it to crack or bust because the counter is cool and the jar is extremely hot. Okay, so we're going to sit there in just a few minutes. We should hear them start sealing. Now the one piece lid here, I will tell you, Usually it takes double the time for it to seal, but I've never had any issues with them sealing. So next I'm gonna go ahead, while we've got the heat off on this, I'm gonna go ahead and put my jars, they're cleaned and washed, but I wanna get them hot and sterilized and go ahead and use this water again. So I'm gonna get my next batch going in here now.
Video.
Okay, so we got those jars out. I'm on to round 2. We're gonna get this knocked out real quick.